I'm James, and I've got a story that'll shatter your trust and loyalty. My wife Emily, a seductive charm, a party that spiraled into betrayal. Grip tight as I take you through a night that nearly cost me my marriage. Subscribe now for more tales of love on the brink. James Smith accompanied his wife Emily to a party he didn't want to attend. He didn't want her to go either, but she insisted. The party took place at the estate of the famous football midfielder, Richard Brown. Richard is 35 years old and retired after leading his team to the championship last year. He was tall, blonde and rich, having made his fortune by wisely investing money from sponsors under Emily's company and more recently under Emily herself. Emily is a financial expert and works for Pinnacle Enterprises, a company that works with many athletes and celebrities. Emily, who is 32, is a stunning blonde beauty, and James considered himself lucky to have won her over and married her in college 10 years ago. Their son, Liam, is 8 years old and looks just like his father. James is almost 6 feet tall, with a medium build. He looks good-natured, but that's not true. He wasn't always this big. As a child, he was always the smallest and poorest kid. His father, Michael, was a sergeant in the army and served at the same base throughout James's life. James was an only child, and his mother Mary was a housewife. She was a second-generation Vietnamese, which slightly aggravated James's problems with his neighbors. Mary was an excellent mother, but sitting at home she could not protect James from the big boys for a while. James's only defense was running. He was good at it, but when he was 7 he lost a race and returned home beaten. His father talked to him about it and then sent James to a family friend, Tony Wilson, at Tony's dojo. James learned to fight there. Tony did not call it the euphemistic word self-defense, but simply a fight. James turned out to be a born fighter with almost endless resentment and even hatred seated within him. Tony's job was to channel these traits and keep them from popping up at the wrong time. In terms of technique, James was strong and fast, although small. He went to Tony's dojo for days a week, including Sundays. This was his church and wrestling was his religion. Michael and Mary were a little hesitant about whether James should attend the dojo. But in addition to being fast and strong, James was also smart. He never got less than an A in any subject. He honestly told his parents that much of his work in the dojo involved controlling his emotions. This is exactly what Tony told Michael, without mentioning that controlling emotions allows you to fight much more effectively. An emotional blow will most likely be sweeping and careless, but to cause the minimum damage, it must be precise. The same goes for a kick or head strike. One day, when he was 9 in an alley near school, James kicked the 5th place of a bigger, older kid. Literally kicked it, but he was able to contain his rage. The child was hurt, but nothing serious, and after that James was no longer a target. It's amazing how rumors spread around school. At 16 James gained height and at 17 he gained strength. This process made him slightly less dexterous, but Tony was able to handle it. At 18 out of high school, James was deadly, thanks to excellent grades. James entered the local university on a public scholarship. He studied mathematics and computers and majored in business. It was in business classes during his junior and senior years that he met and became attracted to Emily. They liked each other immediately. At first due to their obvious intelligence and common interests, but soon an intimate relationship arose between them. They were completely compatible. Emily is an adventurer and explorer, and so is James. They were always looking for ways to make life interesting, but none of these ways involved anyone else. Well, not really sometimes. James wanted Emily to be actress. Jamie Lee Curtis, his favorite fantasy from the film Blue Steel. Sometimes he could be Emily's flavor of the month, but they both made it clear that fantasy is all there is to it. When they agreed to get married, they wrote it down and signed it. This was not a marriage contract, but a solemn promise. After graduating from school, Emily immediately began to earn a lot. She was as smart as James. Well, almost as smart. Her career at Pinnacle was only slightly delayed by the birth of Liam. James worked in a local company doing computer programming. He could work from home, so after 2 months, James became Liam's primary caregiver. James also observed Emily's work. He was interested in her, having received a good bonus for the program. He wrote. He invested in a startup found on Emily's list of promising projects. The magnetism startup was actually making money. 3 guys offered to gather dating information to bring singles together and also other people. It was a promise and it worked out well. James made a lot of money from the startup's initial public offering and then retired. It seemed to him that the time to exploit the idea was running out and others would soon copy it. He told Emily about this. She thought about it and asked her clients to also leave the game. The exit of her clients marked the beginning of magnetism's downfall. James made a short sale. Perhaps illegal, perhaps not now. James had a large amount of money to invest. He didn't tell Emily about all this. 5 years had passed since their marriage and lately James had been alarmed by her behavior. He spent less time with the family, so he kept quiet about his business successes. He registered a company, received a salary from it, and quit his job to start his own business programming for various government agencies. The job was restricted and he had to get clearance. He got it and access to information about himself. In the clearance, the section on Emily was revealing she was a major player in her company and earned more than James had expected. James checked where the money was and discovered that it was an investment account of the company. Not illegal. Everything is in the public domain. But Emily didn't mention it at home. She contributed to a joint account and they filed taxes separately. But although Emily was a financial expert, she paid little attention to her computer. She just wasn't interested in technology other than as an investment. Therefore, her life was an open book for James. He avoided delving too deeply into her affairs on work matters, but having discovered the investment account, he thoroughly searched her laptop and a new mobile phone. There were plans for her work. James's observation of Emily's technique did not raise any suspicions that she was walking, and that was precisely what James was interested in. Instead, she seemed engrossed in her work and the celebrity she and her company represented. The two of them went to parties thrown by actors, basketball players, baseball players, singers and just rich people. These parties happen about 5 or 6 times a year and James usually enjoyed it, even if Emily forgot about it once she got to the venue. But she always went home with him and never disappeared long enough to arouse suspicion. Their life was almost as great as ever. Almost sometimes James felt like she was somewhere else. He felt this way, maybe once a month. This was one of the reasons he decided to check on her more often, but in the end he decided that she was absent solely for work. Everything went as usual until she got Richard Brown as a client. Richard was married to actress Sophia White. She was a beauty and they had 2 daughters, 6 and 8 years old. Emily's predecessor was Dave Green. He was a rake and got into trouble by having the company's clients and making a determined attempt to seduce Sophia White. Dave didn't succeed completely, but she was seduced to such an extent that Richard noticed. So Dave went elsewhere and Emily got his job. Part of the reason she got it was because she was a woman and Richard asked for it. She didn't know that Richard was asking for her specifically. And Emily got Richard as a client. She began to spend even more time at work. She also went with Richard and Sophia to lunch. Sophia knew that Richard had specifically asked that Emily handle his investments, so she went to lunch with them just to see what was what. Surprisingly, she wasn't completely against Richard having an affair with Emily. She herself wanted to go to bed with her co-star in the film she was soon to star in. She thought that if Richard had an affair with Emily, he wouldn't be able to complain about her and Durkallen unless it was to public. At lunch she saw that Richard was very interested in Emily. He tried to act businesslike, but she knew him very well. Emily didn't know Sophia even wondered if Emily would give in to Richard. She studied Emily and knew that she was married and had a child. But her husband was not a wanderer and stayed at home taking care of their son. He looked average and she thought Richard would be successful. She didn't care about Emily's marriage or her family. If Emily screws up, it will be on her. Sophia and Richard were married for almost 10 years. In the first years, while on the road he walked around a bit. It never bothered her too much. She did this herself. But in the last 6 years, ever since they both found out about each other's sins, they promised to save their marriage, and they both succeeded. But now Richard lusted after his financial advisor. Of course she was a beauty, but still Sophia constantly dealt with men using her on themselves, and only recently with Dirk, she felt a strong temptation. She decided that a little activity on the side would not ruin their marriage. He loves his children and so does she. They will both forgive each other. Maybe they will even be able to come to an agreement in a different way. Richard was one of the best Sophia had ever had. It would have been difficult for her to give it up, that she had come to believe that a lack of variety could be the spice of a bland life, at least in part of it. After dinner, Sophia joked with Richard as they drove home. "Do you want this? I saw everything, no matter how hard you tried to hide it from me. Sorry, you made a promise and I will keep it. What if I let you go? Will you let me go? Why?" "Because of that, Dirk. I don't believe what I heard about his manhood and his pounce, but maybe you know about it." "Don't know, just rumors, so to speak. No direct experience, but we will work together for 2 months and you will pursue me to show him off and you like to see if it works. Maybe if he turns out to be a loser, then it will only be a one-time thing." "Sophia, I don't agree. We have a family and we will keep it. I will always love you the most." The other one won't interfere with this, didn't interfere before. "Anyway, I see what you're going to try for that woman and she's married, Richard, and she has a child. Not to mention my husband." Richard looked at her. "You're offering something like an exchange. An eye for an eye. More like breasts for a man's instrument. But yes, you will have to make every effort to keep this a secret. I don't want the girls to read about this in the newspapers or online. This will be my main condition for him. If he breaks it, I'll let you break it. I will say that you are a jealous husband who has many friends with guns. It's clear. Maybe let me think it over. Do you know what? It is quite possible that she will not give in to your efforts. Wouldn't that be great? No substitutions. The deal is concluded only for her. You think I can't have her nonsense prove it? I don't believe the words." She grinned and again thought that men are so simple. That's how Emily became Richard Brown-Tarded. After lunch, Emily drove back to her office. She wasn't as ignorant as the famous couple thought she was. She just knew how to put on a poker face in public, but she knew that Richard was excited throughout lunch from where she stood. She saw it, but Sophia did not. However, Sophia seemed to know this. Emily wondered which one of them turned him on so much, but she decided that it must be her, not his wife of 10 years. No matter how Emily had to decide what to do with Richard, keeping his account was a big step forward for her. But she didn't really need it that much. What did she need? Because if she was honest with herself, she knew she could accept Richard's offer. He was big, brash and strong. James was also strong, but not big. He also didn't show too much personality. Another thing to consider was that Richard has a very large manhood. As she noticed during lunch, it was bigger than she'd ever had, and she admitted to herself that she was curious. Then was the idea that Richard was married to a beautiful movie star, and yet he wanted her an ego boost that Emily didn't need at all. On the other hand, she has a family and a wonderful husband. She didn't want to ruin it all. She also knew that if she started secretly dating Richard, James would find out about it, and it would destroy him. It will destroy the family too. She thought the risk was too great and she decided to refuse Richard. But Richard was persistent. As Sophia's filming date approached, Richard worked hard on Emily. At first he did it subtly. Nimrod for Emily was drawn to him like a magnet. He got to the point where she would get excited when he entered the room, but she would constantly turn him down. One day she allowed him to kiss her after a business meeting in her office. The kiss was hot, but she pulled away and disappeared behind her desk. She was breathing heavily and he was hard as a rock. He said, "Let's do this." "Emily, nobody will know. We both really want this." She nearly cried with disappointment. As she said, "I made a promise to James and I won't break it." "I will not." Richard accepted it. He turned and left her office, although he was just as upset as she was. He returned home and took it all out on Sophia, relaxed and let it happen. Everything was amazing for her. She liked it when Richard took her like a savage, even though he was a savage under a thin layer of plaster perfect for her. And it was all over when it was all over. They were lying on the bed, exhausted, as if they had survived a hurricane. Sophia said, "I believe your financial advisor is keeping you on your toes to my advantage. I'm rooting for her, not you. But if she starts to upset you anymore, I might have to run away." She was making fun of him and he knew it. "I'll drive her away. She's just too devoted to her husband. If you think about it, admirable. Why not leave her alone? If you succeed, she will be a complete fifth place, and not just because of you. I can't leave it like this. While you have an affair with the stallion, I bet he's nothing special, but that won't stop you, right? I told you if he's not too good, I'll only do it once. I may have to kill him." "Sophia, I can get so upset with Emily." "Then wait until filming is over. We don't want to spoil the film, but a mysterious death right before its release will boost the box office." They giggled. Richard thought it over. He was pretty sure Emily wanted him as much as he wanted her, and they kissed. He felt her passion and she felt his. She gasped when this happened, but he had no intention of forcing her. Sophia was already getting ready to film when Richard had an idea and talked to Emily about it. "Emily, I can tell you how much I respect your dedication to your marriage, because I know how much you want me, but I have an idea." Emily immediately became wary, which is, "I want to throw a party in Crystal Lake. There will be a lot of fun people there. Remember when you said that your mom's secret fantasy is Jamie Lee Curtis? So what now? She is not at all the same as she was in the film he likes." Richard showed her a photo of the woman who played the second female role in the film with Sophia, her role of the Temptress Lord. "She looks just like that." "Who's this?" "Is Samantha Wilson. She's filming Sophia's new movie and might be at the party." "And what? Why is this?" "I can arrange for her to hit on James while dressed appropriately. She's 24 and Sophia says she's ready for an adventure. And then what will we do?" "Sophia will have her coaster at later when everyone has left. She would take him upstairs. Samantha will take James upstairs. We will stay with you. Want me to have an affair with you, and he would have an affair with a starlet." "Good idea, Sophia. She'll be out with that idiot Dak and well, we can move on while she's gone. Or it could just be the weekend. Everything is nice and cozy. An orgy. But James will refuse and then he will understand that I set him up. He's not a very nice person when he's angry. Can he really hurt you?" "Not for me, Richard. Don't worry about it. No fights. It's much smaller. I may also have security. Actually, at these parties I always have security. He goes to some dojo." "You know," Richard just smiled. The conversation took place during lunch at a restaurant and they were sitting in a dark booth. Richard was next to her. He pulled her towards him and kissed her as she turned around, placing her hand on his hard-mannered. She did not remove it and kissed him in response. He thought he could take her right there, but it was too risky. She weakly pushed him away and whispered, "Oh my God. Richard, oh damn God." She pressed the button to call the waiter and he immediately appeared, looked at them, but said nothing. Richard paid the bill and they left. Emily returned from lunch in her car. The Crystal Lake party was scheduled to take place on Friday afternoon. Musical groups, many celebrities, mostly from films, possibly several ball players and perhaps wives or maybe not. Emily was worried about how to invite James to the party and how to get him to make the trade. She knew him and he didn't seem flexible, at least as far as other partners are concerned. That's why they signed that promise. In addition, he is smart and will immediately understand what is happening. But if she tells him in advance, he will never go that night over dinner. Chicken roast, James's signature dish. Emily told him about the party. James, Richard and Sophia are having a party before she leaves for filming. There will be many celebrities there. We were invited on Friday. This week. James looked at her. He knew about her attempts to confront Richard. At some point he himself was going to confront Richard, but decided to see what would happen. He must trust his wife. Richard isn't the only handsome guy around here, but James knew Richard might have made some progress. He had information from a source at her work. He also knew that she had turned Richard down more than once. I wanted to talk to you about Richard Brown. It seems to me that you are too close. He's after you, and from what I hear, he's close to getting you. It would be a disaster for you. I didn't do anything with him. He approaches me and I say no. Well, maybe, but not a categorical no, right? And you never told me about it. James, I want to go to the party and I want you to be there too. I'm not going to change. What I think is that you should leave him as a client, like the previous guy, only in reverse. Now he has desires. Maybe you should take a gay guy. You have two of them in your company. I won't do this. I admit that he is a temptation, but I won't give in. I don't want to go to the party there. He will try his best to get you. Things could get ugly if he does. James, he is a grown guy and there will be security there. I can take care of myself. No offense. Emily knew James went to the dojo, but she didn't know how long he'd been doing this or how good he was at what they were doing there. She seemed to know about his deep-seated rage, but she didn't know just how strong it could be. After all, she didn't know how dangerous the party could become. James knew and he resisted. However, as we learned at the very beginning, she insisted on her own that Friday James drove Liam after school to his parents' house in the neighboring county. They would pick him up on Sunday evening. The real reason James agreed to go to the party was that he wanted to settle the issue with Richard once and for all. He was tired of living in tension and he was angry about it. Crystal Lake was Richard and Sophia's 250-acre country estate. It got its name from the large clear lake. At the center of the estate there was a large central mansion, a swimming pool, a tennis court and a large ballroom built at the rear of the house. The party was scheduled to start at 7:00 with a buffet and an open bar. As James was told, the clothes were casual. Emily came downstairs looking like a movie star. Her navy blue dress looked casual. In the same way, a habanero pepper might seem innocuous, but both Emily and the pepper were the hottest things in the world. This did not reassure James. He was wearing slacks, a black and white silk shirt over trousers and loafers. His shoes, while attractive, were functional. Seeing Emily, he said, "Well, everything is clear. Well, stay home and have fun. This is exactly what the dress is for." Emily blushed. "Do you think I look good?" James didn't smile. As he said, "You look amazing, as you know very well. I'm just wondering who you dressed up for you." "Baby, only for you." "Then can we stay and have fun here?" "No, the main thing is to look good for all the movie stars and celebrities. You look great too." James looked at her for a long time. He didn't believe her, but he smiled and walked over to the stereo. He had a song, Betty Phil Collins, in the air tonight. He pressed the play button. It was a song he often used to practice fighting. It had everything for his anger: rhythm, harmony and drum guiding blows. When the time came, the music started playing and he pulled Emily into his arms. She was amazed. Sometimes she heard him humming this song as if in a trance, But now he danced her around and then led her out the door when it closed. Energized by the drumming, he jumped into the air and kicked the branch of a tulip poplar tree in their yard the whole way there. The song played in his head. He was ready if necessary. When they arrived at the house, there were parking attendants, but James told them that he would find a place himself, although he still gave a tip. Then he drove up to the parking spaces and took one little leave immediately. He also gave a tip to the parking attendant so that he would not force the car. Emily was concerned about James's behavior. The song that sounded outside the door seemed strange to her, although good. It was just alarming how James reacted. A kick to the branch made Emily blush. And there's the parking story. It looked like James was preparing for battle as they walked towards the main entrance. She asked him, "Why did you do that in the song? What for it's like you're..." "Well, I don't know. You're preparing for war." "Yes, that's all," he said. Emily turned to him saying, "James, let's have some fun today. At least have fun." "I need a fun evening. Maybe you to just relax and let things take their course." "Okay. That's what I always do in certain situations, baby. And today let's see how everything goes. If things go wrong, it could be the end of us, Emily. Everything flows one way or another." She turned pale for some reason. It seemed that he knew, but from which she remembered how smart he was. Everything is flushed down the toilet before it even begins. But she remembered Samantha. Maybe all is not lost yet. They approached the entrance. Richard and Sophia were alerted to the couple's arrival and that they were parking their car. Samantha was warned to arrive a little later and they themselves met them at the door. Sophia hugged James. She was beautiful and she smelled good. Richard also hugged Emily saying, "Emily, you look so great." Richard then turned to James. "Oh James, we've heard a lot about you. Nice to meet you." He extended his hand to shake. James took it. Richard began to squeeze him like a man. The action was completely wrong. James responded in kind, but not hard enough to cause Richard permanent pain. Richard let go. James smiled at him and said, "Nice to meet you, Richard." Judging by that shrug, maybe I haven't heard enough about you from Emily. This stopped the conversation for a second, as there was a drawn-out pause. Sophia then said, "Why don't we go inside and meet our other guests?" They were introduced in a circle. There were 4 or 5 football players with women, 2 of them wives. There was Dirk and several other actors and actresses. There were 2 boxers and a lot of pretty women were just there. It looked like a stocked bay pond. James wandered around. There was a buffet and James got himself a salad. Emily was with one of the boxers and James could see she was in sales mode. Fine. James took the seltzer. He had no intention of drinking this evening. James watched as Richard walked over to Emily and took her by the elbow. She turned to him and gave him a smile, but then she said something that made him tense. Richard looked back, saw Sophia and waved to her. Sophia disappeared around the corner and then appeared behind James with a woman James had never seen. She looked like Jemai, right down to her hair and build. James was stunned. "Sophia," said James, "I'd like to introduce you to Samantha Allen, my co-star in the film. She's a real talent." James was speechless for a moment. In his opinion, this woman made Emily and Sophia look like witches. Finally he said, "Hello. You are awesome." Samantha was used to guys reacting to her, but she was surprised by James's reaction. It seemed real and smiled at him. She knew her role for tonight. Sophia said that the guy was ordinary, but Samantha, when she saw him, did not agree with this. He made an indelible impression on her. To her he looked strong and robust. Sophia saw all this and was amazed that Sam seemed to be completely smitten. She wasn't such a good actress that she faked her reaction. Sam came to her senses, took James by the elbow and led him towards the pool for privacy. Sam had doubts. She didn't mind the idea of Nick half to death or vice versa, but he was nice. They talked a little. James asked about the film she acted in. She had several, but this was her biggest role. She asked James about his work and he gave her the short version. At the same time, they continued to look at each other. The more they talked, the more Samantha wanted to sleep with James, and she definitely made it clear to him no fake smiles, a look of pure lust back and forth sitting there. They attracted attention. Meanwhile, Emily and Richard were dancing. Emily saw James introduced to Samantha. Then she and Richard went to the dance floor. 2 quick dances and they went to the bar. Sophia and Dirk came up. Emily asked Sophia, and how did James react to Samantha? Sophia felt a little awkward and Emily noticed it. The alarm went off. She asked, what's the matter? Sophia replied, I would say that they fell in love with each other. I've never seen anything like it. Emily was shocked. Where are they? I think, by the pool. Emily went to look and saw the same thing as everyone else, to people who were at the very least blown away. She asked Sophia, is she playing so well? Or is she really falling in love? I fell in love. And it's not just lust. Amazing, looks like your plan to screw Richard is going to work today. He is all yours. Perhaps even for a long time. Judging by them. Emily said, crap. Oh my God. Samantha decided to tell James the whole truth if they were going to be together. She didn't want it to be based on deception. So she told him that she was supposed to distract him. To be a consolation prize. James realized this. She said, James, I can't do this. I have strong feelings for you. They didn't plan this. So please call me if you feel the same way I do. Maybe we can do something about it. Well, you know, depending on what happens here. James said, I'll call you Sam. Anyway, you were the woman of my dreams. I fell in love with you. Sam quickly kissed James and walked towards the parking lot. All the way he looked after her. 5th place had a good rhythm, the same as his fight song. He started hearing the song again and then got up to look for Emily. There was no way he was going to let her have tonight, except maybe with him. James found Emily dancing with Richard, a slow dance. The place for dancing had already been cleared. Only Emily and Richard. Sophia and Dirk danced a slow dance. Sophia and Dirk kissed on the dance floor. Emily and Richard did this less. Obviously Emily had her doubts. Her husband, her love. She may have lost him, but she didn't believe it. Oh really? And Richard's big tool was driving her crazy, rubbing against her stomach. Her ambivalence evaporated. Lust was winning the battle. She let Richard grab her 5th place and pull her towards his tool. He moved back and forth as if they had already had sex. Richard kissed her, sometimes tenderly, sometimes more insistent. Instantly Emily was lost. At that moment James emerged from around the corner. He moved to the rhythm of his song. The guards moved towards him. James ignored them. They were big guys, but he thought that they had only size and no ability to fight. James patted Richard on the shoulder. I'm cutting in. Richard replied, go Sam tonight. Emily is mine. I sent Sam away. She's gone. But Emily is free and she's my wife. So back off. Richard walked away. He waved his hand to his guards. They came up. James looked at Emily and said, you set me up, woman. And if you stay here, we're done. There will be no turning back. I do not believe in this. You won't leave our family because of one night, the only night we bet. Because I won't let you have sex with this guy, and if I have to kill him, I will do it. This made everyone freeze. Richard could see that James was deadly serious, but he couldn't understand how James could carry out his threat. He waved his hand towards the 2 guys. Emily froze when James spoke now. He was afraid there was no more arousal. She said, I don't understand, why wouldn't you agree to this? You really like Samantha. You could have a great time, and so would I. Can't allow this. He made promises. I do mine and you will do yours, whether you like it or not, at least this evening. If you feel like you need a new made instrument, we can divorce, but your little setup won't work here. Sophia said, Richard, leave it alone. I won't have sex with Dirk. Leave it. I won't. This guy is talking nonsense. Richard turned to Emily. Do you want to leave with him? Emily replied, I have no choice. If I don't leave, something very bad will happen. Richard decided to get rid of the irritant and told the security guys, throw this guy out now. They moved towards him, one on each side, and they grabbed him by the hands. James watched Emily. She didn't move. She just looked. Then she stepped towards Richard. It took James less than 10 seconds to disarm the two guards. He stomped on one's foot, turned and punched the other in the throat. Then he turned to the first one and also hit him in the throat. They fell like big trees. James heard his song. The rhythm sounded in his head. Loud and clear composition on the air drum roll. Now nothing could stop him. Richard got burned. Richard felt fear like he had never felt before. Emily's soft-hearted husband was going to kill him, and in an instant he realized that he could not defend himself. But he tried. He swung at James, who stepped aside and laughed. James swayed to the music. He hit Richard in the crotch and then hit him under the ear with the edge of his hand, and Richard fell. Everything happened very quickly. None of the women had time to react. They were stunned by the rapid disposal of the security guys and barely had time to move before James knocked the big Richard down with a second blow. James swayed to the rhythm in his head, beating his rhythm. He raised his leg above Richard, but Emily realized that James was going to kill Richard and she screamed. No, James. No, he's not worth it. James heard her not words but a primal cry of fear, and he hesitated. Richard fell but didn't pass out. He was a professional athlete and an elite one at that. When James hesitated, Richard staggered to his feet and rushed to the pool, running for his life. He ran straight to the deep end of the pool and hit his head on the diving board. He didn't know how to swim. It didn't matter, though, because he was unconscious. Sophia followed him. When she saw Richard in the pool, she screamed. He was already underwater. He couldn't swim at all. James and Emily were next to her. James saw Richard was drowning, took off his boots, dove into the water and pulled Richard back to the surface. He dragged him to the side and pushed him out of the pool onto the concrete at the feet of the women. James climbed out of the pool in a flash. He turned Richard into the correct position and with a few thrusts, squeezed the water out of his lungs. The water came out and Richard started coughing. James turned to Sophia, call 911. She turned and ran into the house. Richard panted, still coughing a little. James examined him, and when he was sure that Richard was out of danger, he left. Emily stared after him, feeling dead inside. James checked the condition of the two guards. They were alive and conscious. However, they needed medical attention. James was all wet, but he sat on the steps at the entrance and waited for the police and ambulance. Soon two police cars and two ambulances arrived. Everyone was fussing around. Jack was waiting. He saw two security guys come out on their own, but they were put into an ambulance. Richard was soon carried out, but he was conscious and in no danger. However, he was taken away anyway. He waited. Sophia came up to him and said, I'll give you dry clothes. Come with me. He followed her up the stairs. She pulled a t-shirt and a sweater from the closet in the master bedroom, both of which were too big for him. He moved towards the bathroom to change clothes, but Sophia said, change your clothes right here, I want to see. She gave up. James took off his shirt. His shoes were left somewhere by the pool. He took off his socks. Then he dropped his trousers. Only boxers remained and they were still wet. He looked at Sophia. She smiled at him and he took them off. Despite everything, he had an erection. Sophia looked at him carefully and threw him some sweatpants. He turned around so she could see everything. Then he put on a t-shirt and sweater. Sophia said, you don't have a drop of fat. You're too good to be true. What's Emily's problem? Now he was already wearing pants. He said, how should I know? Maybe we need a bigger man's instrument. Maybe a famous athlete. But really I think he just starved her out. He's a handsome guy, isn't he? Yes, that's for sure, you know. James, if you ever need reassurance, you can call me fine. I might need this. Of course it could be Samantha. This girl is just a naughty girl. She will become a big star. She definitely brought out the stars in my eyes. She's the exact one for me. So maybe Emily overestimated her capabilities. But you have a child. The main reason I stayed with Richard was the children. Besides, he's handsome. But on set I was going to act with Dirk. And where is he? I haven't seen him since it all started. Yes, big action hero. He ran away by the time the guards hit the ground. He was already in flight. I changed my mind about having sex with him. I think Richard will change his mind about having sex with Emily. But maybe you want to sleep with Sam. Certainly. As they say, what goes around comes around. He smiled and said, but if you ever need me for any reason, I'll help. You necessarily listen. She laughed. Let's see what happens to Emily and with Sam. They returned downstairs. As Emily emerged from the cafeteria where the police was stationed, she looked at the couple suspiciously and asked, what are you two up to? Look guilty. Sophia replied, look who's talking. Well, I gave James a clothes and I watched him change of clothes, and I watched him change his clothes. You're an idiot. Emily. Sophia left. A police detective came out of the room and called James. James sat down opposite a policeman. The guy was an older white man with the look of a cornered dog. The woman was elegantly dressed, young and somewhat attractive. Stevens and Wright. The older man said. Stevens took the initiative. Are you some kind of wizard? No, but I'm good at it. As a child I was small. I had to study. Tell me what happened. Stevens said. James went through all the events as he remembered them. 2 hours had passed since the rescue, as he remembered everything well. At the end, Wright asked, were you going to kill Mr. Davis? Hard to say. My wife screamed and I went out of my rhythm after that. I wouldn't do it. So you saved his life. I couldn't watch him drown. I was no longer in kill mode then. Besides, if he were dead now I would have much bigger problems. You know, he hit me first. Well, he tried. That's what everyone says. But that was after you defeated the security guys. Yes, everything was as I said. Will you arrest me? No, the decision is up to the prosecutor. But the case will receive wide publicity. So we don't know. The new prosecutor is a liberal. So we have no idea what to do. So I can go home. Yes, by the way, there are videos everywhere in the house. We are downloading them now. We will contact you if we have any further questions. Don't blame Richard Brown for trying to hit me. He's good for nothing. Wright laughed, but Stevens remained serious. James wasn't trying to be funny. James walked out onto the main landing where Emily was sitting on the stairs with Sophia. He looked at her and said, I'm leaving. You can come with me or not. Emily stood up. He turned to Sophia and said, Sophia, thank you for an interesting evening. Sophia smiled at her. I hope the next party will be a little more modest. I also hope that you both make peace. She looked straight at Emily. I was completely serious when I said what I said. He is awesome in my own way. You are a fool. Samantha won't be such a fool if she gets the chance. Emily and James got into the car and James drove off. They returned home at 2:30 in the morning. Emily took a shower first, then James. She was already asleep when he came out, and 2 minutes later he fell asleep too. They both overslept. James got up around 10:00 and went to prepare breakfast. He was hungry at the party. He had only eaten a small salad. Emily appeared while he was eating cereal. She was dressed in a short sleeveless dress of faded pink, knowing full well what James liked about this old thing. But James looked at her and went back to his cereal a minute later. He said, I'm not that simple. And even if I did, it would just be. Emily smiled. That would be a great start. Just let me know I owe you and I'm ready to pay and pay and pay. James was crazy about her, but then he thought about Samantha. Emily was eating corn cereal chewing. She spoke. I'm sorry that I tried to conspire against you. It was very wrong and I hope that someday I will be forgiven. Until then, you can get whatever you want from me. She looked at him up and down in the last few hours. 2 movie stars and my very wife have proposed to me, and yet somehow I managed to resist, which is more than you could have done if I had left you there with Richard. This is strength. Well, that's what I thought, but you beat him like a drum. I knew you did this in the dojo, but God, James, I'm very good at a lot of things. Emily, maybe I just don't promote myself enough. I told you about my hobby. Yes, you told me, can I go to the dojo with you for what? She blushed. Because it's so hot. You can beat up anyone and I can help it. But I imagine you beating up those guys, including Richard. I almost reached a no contact CLLEM. But a puppet in your hands. She stood up and took off her dress. There was nothing underneath. He looked her up and down. He saw how excited she was. He stood up, walked around the kitchen table and pointed to the floor. She immediately knelt down, realizing what he wanted, and pulled out his manhood. The last one was not so easy because he was very hard. Then she set about it with a fervor she had not shown for a long time. He was impressed. He picked her up and carried her to the living room sofa, bending her over the back. She knew what to do. She squirmed in front of him. He spread her and plunged inside, rubbing the sensitive part of her private part against the back of the sofa. With its rough upholstery, she reached the finish line and exploded like a TNT bomb. He continued to work on her, and she continued to pulsate, rising to the height of CLLEM. Then he came to the finish line, erupting like a volcano again and again. James knew she wasn't faking her new attraction to him. Not to say that she had been as cold as a fish before, but to be honest, there had been a little stagnation until that evening at Crystal Lake. Now she was so hot for him and very hot for herself. James's thoughts raced between movie stars. He wanted Samantha badly. She may have become a threat to his marriage, but he also wanted Sophia. He saw her when she looked at him and he could have her. She saw how easily he handled her big, strong husband, and it turned her on. Just as Emily was aroused, he thought that he could have many women, just at what cost? Beating up their men? No, he couldn't do that. At least not often. He needed to think things through. Of course, not all women wanted a guy to beat up their man and then have sex with them. Of course that wouldn't be civilized. Emily caressed his manhood and then grinned, saying, "Oh well, they're so much fun." They spent most of Saturday in the grip of all-consuming lust. They had sex in every way they could think of by 10:00 at night. James was exhausted and couldn't do it anymore. Emily cheered, saying, "I won the competition. You were a good competitor, but the woman has the advantage." She didn't say, but she thought, let's get the next one. He was still giggling as he fell asleep, but if he had heard her thoughts, he would not have been so complacent. Sunday started off modestly. Emily made pancakes and they used maple syrup. Then Emily took the last pancake covered in syrup, lifted her skirt and rubbed the pancake all over her crotch, then stuffed it into herself. She looked at him and smiled, saying, "It seems like my eyes are hungrier than my stomach. Maybe you want to eat the last pancake." James ate the pancake and licked all the syrup. Emily was delighted. All it took to bring her Superman husband to his knees was to place some sweets in the right place. James's face was covered in syrup and crumbs. When he finished breakfast, Emily pushed him onto the carpet and straddled him. She started licking the syrup off his face while rocking on top of him. She made it most of the way before they both reached the finish line and collapsed on top of him. She smeared her face a little with syrup, real Vermont maple, the very best it tasted. Pretty funny, though the rest of the day was less impressive. Both were tired and decided to take a walk in the local park and have a picnic when they returned home after their walk. Emily asked, "Are we okay about Friday?" James looked at her and replied no. Emily looked shocked. Why, we love each other. I know that you plotted for both of us to break our promises. I need to understand everything. You know I have other options. Sophia. Yes, used your special knowledge of me to force me to break my oath. Just so Big Richard could. Yes, I guess it was pure lust. He constantly pestered me. He is hot. But don't you think that if everything had worked out the way you planned, we would eventually break up? No, why? Lack of trust. Lack of respect. Emily lowered her eyes. I haven't really thought about all this. Then Richard sent his guards on me. I looked at you and you stepped towards him. I must have assumed they would throw me out. Oh, James, they were big in everything. Yeah. And when they threw me out, you and Richard would have sex and the marriage would be over. I think I'd go with you. James, lust or not, I really doubt it. I'd say it's 50-50th, and you know it makes me feel humiliated. I will never let myself go through this again. I know what you can do now. I know when I think about this, I feel uneasy. Emily, I don't want you to be loyal to us just because you think I'm the strongest animal in the jungle. I thought we loved each other. When you suggested that Richard might eliminate me as a nuisance, you stepped towards him. She sobbed and ran out of the room upstairs. He didn't follow her. They both knew that what he said was true. James had a couple of beers and watched a baseball game. When faced with an important decision or a stressful situation, he usually thought as if immersed in himself. Then he would surface and ask himself a few questions now. His thoughts were on baseball only. The game was great and he became very interested when it was all over. He asked the obvious question: what were his prospects? The first was to stay with Emily. The second was to date Samantha and see what happens next. The third was to pursue Sophia and then play in the field for a while. But he thought he could do all three. But this was unrealistic. Just a fantasy. And recently he was shown what happens when fantasies come true. Life turns to crap. James stood up and went upstairs to bed. Emily was already asleep. He kissed her on the forehead and fell asleep next to her. Then they woke up. James kissed her again and said nothing more. They got dressed and Emily went to work on Monday. James called Samantha and said he was going to try staying with Emily for a while. He asked her to call him when she returned from filming. She agreed. Then she said Emily is a lucky girl. James, if she goes too far, please call me. I will call. James called Sophia. How is Richard doing? He will be discharged from the hospital today. His reproductive organs are swollen. I can't say I'm surprised. I'd like to talk to him if possible. Should he call me when he's ready? I'm not going to quarrel with him. I'll ask. He'll pick him up later today. James came to Richard and Sophia's apartment in the city. Richard was sitting on the sofa. What do you need? Sorry for not getting up. I wanted to say that I decided to try to save my marriage. Of course, I'm not very pleased that you spent so much time and effort ruining everything. But I can understand famous man sometimes behaves narcissistic, ally. Yes, I'm actually sorry. You can say I was in lust with Emily and with you. But I'm not always like this. Then why now? I found her to be super attractive and smart. So smart. Sorry. If she's still your consultant, can you get rid of her? Yes, especially because you could very well kill me if I don't. It's bad for both of us. Especially for me, something like that. Fine. Keep your word. He'll hold back. Sophia, who was listening to them, said I will make sure he is satisfied. I'll take him with me to the shoot and relieve you of excessive enthusiasm. James smiled. HEK, a lucky guy. And he knows it isn't that right. Dear. I know I just forgot for a while, by the way. James, thanks for getting me out of the pool. But why did you do this? I couldn't watch you drown. But if you watch the footage, you will see how I hesitated before diving. I don't know what to think about you. He pointed to his groin. It hurts, but at least I'm alive. Yes, not an easy situation. Look, I have nothing against you if you leave her alone. In fact, I don't want to offend Emily, but I may not stay with her. If I don't stay, you'll have a chance, but ask first, why would you leave her? I don't understand. James said recent events with this stupid plot to switch things up. So you could. Here's the thing. Suppose I were not as good as I actually am. Then your guards would have kicked me out, and where would I have slept that night? I don't know the answer to this question. Sophia said I bet she would have gone home with you. She didn't want to leave the marriage. I wanted my stallion to her here, letting you have Sam a dream come true for you. Once Sam left, her plan went off the rails, but she stepped towards Richard. I saw this on video. You should watch it too. I actually think she might have come with me, but maybe not. I just don't know what to think. He was talking mostly to Sophia now, but Richard intervened. When it comes to lust, then women are just as weak as men. I spent a lot of time and effort trying to get under Emily's skirt, and damn, she resisted. She wanted to have sex with me very much, but she fought it. She never went with me to some motel and didn't let me her on a table like I wanted. He must give her credit. James looked at him. Okay, I give her credit. Maybe I'm overthinking. For a long time we were fine, but damn, it was so bad. Sophia said give her time. By the way, Sam asked about you. Well, you know what's wrong with you. I told her what happened there. How she was there ready to see Liam over the phone. It's about Emily's chances. What's the matter with women? Is it like during the caveman days, beat up your husband, get your wife? This is so crazy. Darling, I think it's programmed in the genes. As soon as a woman finds out that you are the arbiter of destinies, she wants you. This happens to Emily too. Right. Yes, me too. She looked at him as if she was ready to drag him upstairs right then, and then Richard growled, but he could barely move. I better leave. Sophia. You are one of the options I've been considering, but I have to talk to Emily. Finally, James left with palpable excitement when Emily returned from work. James immediately took her upstairs while Liam was watching a video in the TV room. James threw Emily onto the bed and had her hard until she see how Liam ed. He didn't think about satisfying her, but she still reached a strong see Liam. Emily was breathing heavily as he stood up from her and said hello. How's your day? James laughed, and so did she. You're so smart. He said I went to Richard and Sophia turned me on without even touching. But you got me. Emily asked what's for dinner. Pizza. Then me again. He agreed this time they were in no hurry. It was very pleasant for both of them. After dinner, Liam went to his room to study and Emily asked, are we fine? Because I'm sorry that I react to the fact that you were an alpha male. I can't do anything about it. I guess Sophia does too. Yes, and now you beat her husband. The former alpha male. How is he? By the way, he'll get better. His reproductive organs were swollen, but Sophia will take him with her to the film shoot. Cute. She nurses him and he won't have sex with that idiot. Dirk. There was an order between Emily and James that James liked. He got sex when he wanted it and how he wanted it, but in some strange way he was tired of it. She was so submissive. 6 weeks later, Sophia and Richard returned and invited Emily into Crystal Lake for another party with the scene crew of the film. James was ambivalent. Emily too, but they decided to go. It was a movie party. No athletes except Richard. Emily was driving and she asked the valet to park the car. Sophia met them at the door and Samantha came right behind them with a dark-haired, brown-eyed, handsome man. Sophia said, welcome. Sam, you know Emily and James guys. Sam, this is Vince, the co-star in the film. Vince said, well, unless they cut me out during editing. Sam assured they won't cut it out. Big boy women need to be attracted too. They all went inside. James found himself jealous of Vince and Sam. Richard met them at the buffet. He and James shook hands. This time there was no male competition. Richard gave Emily a rather chaste hug. Emily and James began to circulate in the crowd. This crowd consisted of the film's crew, including director Hector Solis and writer Blake Davis. The two were busy with themselves. James was not at all eager to approach them. Just like that, Hector began to pursue Emily. He told her that she should pass the casting and then she could star in the film. Emily laughed. Hector hugged Emily, but she soon pushed him away. He was a big guy with big hands and a big nose, not very pleasant to look at. Impudent James knew Emily wouldn't have any problems with him. The party continued for some time. James drank beer and ate kebabs. Emily was talking to Vince by the pool. She seemed to attract attention from all sides. Samantha and Sophia approached James, who was watching. "Emily," Sam asked, "are you worried?" "No, I believe we have reached a new agreement. How are things going with you and Vince?" Sophia replied, "He is a man and she was all alone." James looked at Sam. She nodded. That's pretty much how it was. He's a rake held red to hit on Emily. In fact, this is exactly what he's doing now. Well, she's independent. If she screws up, we're screwed. But I believe that we will be okay. Sam said, "I can't say I'm glad to hear this." Sophia chimed in, "Me too." James laughed. To super movie stars crap. They separated. James walked over to where Emily was still talking to Vince. It seemed to James that Vince was slightly wedging himself into her space. He took her hand and asked, "So Vince, what's it like to make a movie?" Vince replied, "I was just telling Emily that this is very hard work. Not at all romantic." "Well, there is Sam." Vince smiled. "We must admit that this is so. Sam is great, but the work is still grueling." James led Emily aside, where Richard stood alone. He didn't mix well with the movie people, except for the two stuntmen. Emily asked VJ, "How was it on the set?" He went right. GVJNJ, "Ah yes. It lasted 2 weeks, but it wasn't that much fun. Just being with Sophia, I left when filming of her scenes with Dirk ended. I didn't have to kill him." James said that's good, things could get messy. The three of them laughed. Dirk was on the other side of the pool talking to a young woman who looked fascinated by him. Richard said this is one of the extras who was brought him late. He probably hadn't seen him before. Looks like he's making progress. Emily said, "I heard from an anonymous source that he has very great dignity." Richard looked at her. She replied, "No, this is not Sophia." Emily had a couple of other clients who might be dating JK. James said, "Great dignity. What is this?" Emily replied, "I wasn't that inquisitive." James nodded, "Fine." The evening continued, with some people using the pool, but not Richard. The most interesting thing for James was when Samantha came out in a bikini and started swimming. In fact, it was interesting to almost the entire male cast of guests when Sama peered into the pool. Sophia was standing next to James. She muttered, "Bragger." James said, "You can take a swim too, but some guys can get overly excited and deal watch." Sophia stared at James. Then she smiled at him and said, "I will do it, you do it too." Emily heard this, looked at James and said, "Well, now is the time to speak or remain silent. Just no prolonged physical contact." James and Sophia went upstairs. James didn't have swim trunks, but there were several different sizes available for the guests. Sophia tossed James a black thong. He tossed them back and chose an old-fashioned pair of swim trunks. She gave him blue ones instead of compromise. Sophia undressed and put on a bikini. James watched with interest. She was beautiful. She nodded towards his swimming trunks. James took off all his clothes and tried to get into his swimming trunks, but watching began to excite him. "Help." He asked. "No," James answered. "Please do not. I have enough problems as it is." He squeezed himself into his swim trunks and lost his hardness in the process. The two of them went downstairs. Sophia plunged into the water. took 3 steps and dived in next to Sam. James was impressed with the dive. There was a diving board and James knew how to use it. He jumped, took a few short steps and performed a perfect somersault into the water, emerging to applause. One of those who applauded was Emily. She knew that every woman present wanted him, including the movie stars in the pool, but he was hers at least for a while. Vince approached Emily as she watched James flirt with Sam and said, "You are as beautiful as those two." She looked at him. He was very handsome, big and beautiful. She said, "Thank you, but your mission to get will not succeed, and in the end you won't like what happens with faint disappointment." He smiled charmingly. He was definitely an actor. Sophia, Sam and James left the pool. Sophia said, "There are suites upstairs for anyone who wants to swim, and on the tennis court we will have to sing to music with a DJ." Sam and Sophia, along with James, approached Emily and Vince openly stared at the women. Then, to Emily's surprise, he started staring at James. Emily asked Sam, "What does it mean?" Sam laughed. "He plays for both teams. Interesting guy. I'll tell you, maybe you should keep an eye on James." Emily giggled. "If James leaves with him, I'll get to Richard and perhaps to both of you too." Sophia and Sam, still wet, moved closer to Emily as if some secret signal had passed between them. They began to hug her, one on each side, until she broke away. She sighed, "Just kidding. Girls kidding." Both women looked so disappointed until they started laughing. James watched all this and his swimming trunks could not hide his reaction. All the women noticed this immediately. Sophia said, "Oh God. James, what is this?" James replied, You saw it." Sam said, "But I didn't see it. Now it's my turn." She grabbed hand and pulled him inside and up the stairs. Emily followed them. She was still dressed but wet from the hug, plus she needed to protect James from the predatory Sam if this was still possible. She thought that this was all almost out of control and the threat was only growing, but it turned out that she was not so against it. Right behind Emily was Sophia. She was more than curious about what would happen. The 4 of them found themselves in the master bedroom, where James had previously shed his clothes. Emily said, "We have to get out of these wet things." Sophia let out a cry of glee and her top fell to the floor before she had even pulled her bottom off. Sam was already naked. Emily took longer as she was wearing a dress and panties, but not much longer. James became a victim of overload. He stood there stunned by the way the women looked at each other. He understood that almost anything could happen, but he did not know what he wanted. Strictly speaking, this was a lie. He understood perfectly well that he wanted all 3 of them, and first of all Sam. But this did not fit in with his position on morality in marriage, but this position had already changed a lot, despite all the prohibitions. Sophia came up behind him, knelt down and pulled his trunks down, his tool popping out. She reached out and brushed his hands. Sam moved closer to Emily, pulled her close and kissed her. Emily answered, but then Sophia came out from behind James. She said, "No more promiscuity. The party continues and I am a hostess and I won't let you 3 have sex without me." She tossed Sam and Emily dresses for the pool, short light dresses. Emily put one of them on herself. James was still naked and the women were looking at him. Emily asked, "How do we dress him?" Sophia replied, "Why should we let him wear clothes?" Sam said, "Because we want it for ourselves. If it comes to that, we have to cut off Vince and those young girls." Emily said, "I didn't agree to anything." She tossed James his usual swimming trunks and the t-shirt. Both others groaned. They all went down to the tennis court where the dancing was taking place. Richard walked up to James and said, "Have you already had all 3? "No, although Lord, he changed clothes right there in your bedroom." "Sorry, but there was nothing special." Sophia stopped everything. Richard said, "I couldn't stop myself. I guess I'm weak." Richard said, "I'm ready to exchange with you for tonight." James looked at him. "No, that sounds interesting. But no, Sophia is a real tigress, Sophia. I just cannot. Oh, my mother raised me wrong. Richard laughed and then said, well, at least he'll dance with her Sam too. Richard walked up to Emily and took her to the floor to dance the jitterbug. Emily looked at James, who waved at her. The crowd thinned out. Sophia danced with Vince. Samantha walked up to James and simply led him onto the dance floor. As the DJ switched to slow music, James pulled her close. Sam whispered in his ear, I think the time has come for us. Richard has Emily. He will turn her on and Sophia will try Vince. This is the ultimate test of your toughness. Moral fortitude too. He passed one test but failed the other. The whole party looked like a bunch of teenagers playing spin the bottle. The slow music ended and James and Sam started dancing to medium-fast music. Sam danced really well. She slid around, James slid over her body and began to harden again. She answered him the same. They disappeared into each other. Meanwhile, Richard, as predicted, turned Emily on. At first he held back, remembering the last party, but Emily got excited and James waved her through, allowing her to go to the floor with Richard. Sophia and Vince weren't so excited. Sophia was more interested in the other two couples. Vince was fine, but Sophia was interested in Sam and James. It was like a depraved morality game. She knew that if James left with Sam, Emily would go upstairs with Richard, but she didn't know what would happen and she didn't know what she would do if they split into pairs. She thought she would join Richard with Emily first, maybe then with Sam and James. Vince remained out of work. Then, at the pre-arranged time, DJ Mick took a break. It was unpleasant for him to do this because he was interested in the events on the dance floor. But union rules and all that. I'll be back in 10 minutes, he said quietly and went to get a beer. Union rules. There were only 6 of them left, plus the staff. Everyone approached the table between the pool and the dance floor. There were a few sidelong glances, no chatter, lots of tension. Sophia said, I was wondering which of you I would join first. This statement was like a bomb dropped on the table. Emily held Richard's hand. Sophia was sitting on Vince, but it was as if he was just her chair. He felt left out exactly. Emily looked at James and saw that Sam would take him if she wanted. And it was at that moment that Emily decided that James was the only man for her and that she did not want to share him. She stood up, dropping Richard's hand, swaying slowly. She walked over to James and leaned down to kiss him. James kissed her back. Sam was still on his lap and heard Emily whisper to James, It's time to go home. I love enough excitement to keep us going until next time. Sam stood up for James groaned. But Emily pulled him towards her and wrapped her arm around his waist. She looked around and said, Take this man home where he belongs. On the way out, James took the keys. He was in a trance-like state, so Emily drove the car. When they arrived home, Emily immediately took him to bed and removed his skimpy clothes. She covered him with her body and took possession of him. They made love slowly and sensually. James didn't think about Sam. He was only here with his wife. Everyone admits weakness sometimes, but at that moment we rely on others to make sure everything is okay, and we're lucky if we have someone who can do it. The next morning, James and Emily woke up in each other's arms. The tension from the previous night seemed to have dissipated. They spent the day together talking, cooking and playing with their son Liam. They felt like a fresh start. A few days later, James received a call from Samantha. James, it's Sam. I just wanted to check in. How are things with you and Emily? We're working on it. Sam, thanks for asking. How are you? I'm good. I just wrapped up filming. I wanted to let you know. I'm back in town. That's good to hear, James said, feeling a mix of emotions. Maybe we can meet up sometime just to talk. Sam suggested. James paused, thinking about the complexities of his current situation. Maybe I'll have to see how things go here. But I appreciate you reaching out after the call. James found Emily in the kitchen. Sam called. She's back in town. Emily looked at him, a hint of concern in her eyes, and she wants to meet up just to talk, she said. Emily took a deep breath. Do you want to? I don't know. I think we need to focus on us right now, James replied honestly. Emily nodded. I agree. Let him work on us first over the next few weeks. James and Emily made a concerted effort to rebuild their trust and connection. They spent more time together, had deeper conversations, and even went to a couples therapy session. It wasn't easy, but they were both committed to making it work. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily said, James, I want you to know that I'm really sorry for everything, for the party, for even considering Richard, for putting us in that situation. James squeezed her hand. I know, Emily, and I'm sorry for not being more open with you about my feelings and for letting things get this far. We're in this together, and we'll get through it together. As the weeks turned into months, the incidents of the past began to fade into the background. James and Emily found a new rhythm, one built on mutual respect, love, and a deeper understanding of each other.